My mom forbade me from celebrating my son's 10th birthday because my brother's kids didn't feel special enough, so I walked away. My name is Allison Grant, and I am 34 years old. The phone call that changed everything came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I was at the kitchen table helping my son Ethan with his math homework just weeks before his 10th birthday. When my phone buzzed with my mom's name, I answered, trying to sound cheerful. "Allison," she began, her voice perfectly calm, the way it always was when she was delivering an order, not an opinion. "You can't throw a party for Ethan this year." The words felt like a punch. "What?" "Mom, it's his 10th birthday. It's a family decision," she said, as if that settled it. "Your brother's kids already feel left out. Patrick and Jessica had to postpone their Disney trip. A party right now would be insensitive." I stared at the wall, speechless. My brother's children, with their private school, dance recitals, and endless privileges, felt left out by the idea of my son's simple celebration. Ethan just wanted a homemade cake, a new soccer ball, and a few friends in our patchy backyard. He just wanted to feel seen for one day. "You're being selfish," she continued, her voice sharp with disapproval. "You only think about yourself. Family is about sacrifice." I glanced over at Ethan. He was trying to pretend he wasn't listening, but his face had crumpled, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. He understood. He knew his place in the family hierarchy. In that moment, the fight drained out of me completely. "Okay, Mom," I whispered. After I hung up, he looked at me, a single tear rolling down his small cheek. "She doesn't like me very much, does she?" As I pulled him into a hug, I finally admitted a truth I'd avoided for years. In this family, my son's happiness wasn't a joy to be celebrated. It was a threat to be managed. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment, where are you watching from? In my mom's world, love had a balance sheet. It wasn't something I understood as a child, but as I got older, the accounting became painfully clear. Every action, every success, and every failure was entered into a silent, invisible ledger. My brother Patrick was always on the asset side of the column. I was, and always had been, a liability. Patrick was the success. He was 2 years older than me, and from the moment he was born, he was the golden child. He was the one who got straight A's without trying, the one who was captain of the football team, the one who went to a state university on a partial scholarship. He met his wife Jessica in college. She was perfect too, blonde, organized, and president of her sorority. They got married a year after graduation in a lavish ceremony my parents paid for. They bought a house in a gated community, had 2 beautiful children on a precise schedule, and posted perfect family photos on social media. Patrick became a realtor and was naturally good at it, his easy charm convincing people to buy homes they couldn't afford. He was the walking, talking embodiment of my mother's dreams. He was her pride, me? I was the cautionary tale. I was the quiet, artistic one who preferred books to parties. I got good grades, but I had to work for them. I went to a community college because we couldn't afford another university tuition after Patrick's. That's where I met Ethan's father. He was charming and fun, and for a little while I thought I had found my own perfect story. But it fell apart quickly. He wasn't ready to be a father, or maybe he just wasn't ready to be a father with me. He left when I was 6 months pregnant, and I never heard from him again. I dropped out of college, moved into a tiny apartment, and got a job as a receptionist. I worked my way up slowly, taking online bookkeeping courses at night after Ethan was asleep. Now I worked from home, keeping the books for a handful of small local businesses. I lived in a rented duplex. I drove a 10-year-old car. I was a single mom with potential, a word my mother used with a sigh, as if it were a heavy burden. "Patrick gives me pride," she told me once, during a moment of brutal honesty. We were in her kitchen, and she was complaining about a minor argument she'd had with Jessica. "I can go to my bridge club and talk about his new sales record, about the kids' private school. It makes me feel good." "You," she said, turning to look at me, her eyes filled not with malice, but with a kind of weary disappointment. "You give me worry." That was the core of it. Her love was tied to her image. Patrick's success reflected well on her. My struggles were a stain on her reputation as a perfect mother with a perfect family. The ledger was present in every family gathering. When Patrick announced he was taking the family to Hawaii, my mother clapped her hands in delight and spent the next month telling everyone she knew. When I announced I had finally paid off my student loans from community college, she nodded and said, "Well, that's good. One less thing to worry about." His achievement was a celebration. Mine was just the removal of a deficit. When Ethan was born, I saw the accounting extend to the next generation. Lily and Noah, Patrick's children, were assets. They were beautiful, well-behaved, and enrolled in all the right activities. Ethan was a liability from the start. He was a reminder of my failure, of the broken relationship and the life I was supposed to have. My mom tried in her way. She bought him sensible gifts for his birthday, savings bonds, practical shoes, educational toys he had no interest in, but she never looked at him with the same unadulterated adoration she had for Lily and Noah. When Lily would sing a song off-key, my mother would call her a little songbird. When Ethan would proudly show her a drawing he'd made, she would smile politely and say, "That's nice, dear. Don't get crayon on the sofa." When she said Ethan's birthday party would hurt feelings, what she really meant was that our joy wasn't convenient. Our small, simple celebration didn't add anything to the asset column of the family ledger. It didn't give her a story to tell at her bridge club. In fact, it did the opposite. It highlighted the contrast between her two children, a contrast she worked so hard to manage and minimize. My happiness, and by extension my son's, was a messy, inconvenient number that threw off her perfectly balanced books. I remember one Christmas Eve vividly. Ethan was 5. I had saved for months to buy him the one thing he wanted more than anything in the world, a huge, multicolored Lego castle. It took up half my living room floor when we assembled it. His eyes were like stars when he saw it. He spent the entire morning building it, his little hands carefully snapping the tiny bricks together. Later that day, we went to my mother's house for the family celebration. Patrick and his family were already there, surrounded by a mountain of glossy, expensive gifts. Lily and Noah were showing off their new iPads. My mother greeted us at the door. "What did Santa bring you, Ethan?" she asked. Ethan's face lit up. "A castle. It's giant and it has a dragon and a king and—" My mom's smile tightened. She glanced at Patrick and Jessica, who were watching with polite indifference. "A castle? That sounds big," she said. She pulled me aside into the kitchen, her hand gripping my arm. "Allison, we talked about this," she whispered, her voice sharp. "We agreed to keep the gifts modest this year. Patrick's business had a slow quarter." "It was one gift, Mom," I said, my own voice a low whisper so Ethan wouldn't hear. "It was the only big thing he got." "An iPad is a tool for school," she argued, as if that made any sense. "A giant toy castle is just excessive. It makes it look like you're trying to compete." Compete. That word again. I wasn't competing. I was just trying to give my son a magical Christmas. I was trying to make his dreams come true with the limited resources I had. But in her eyes, my attempt to create joy for my son was an act of aggression against my brother. It was a disruption to the established order. Was told to go back into the living room and encourage Ethan to play with the family. Gifts my mother had bought, a set of generic, wooden blocks for all 3 grandchildren to share. My son's magical castle was not to be mentioned again. That was the system. My brother's family was the standard, and we were the deviation that needed to be corrected. Our lives had to be edited and curated to fit into her narrative of a happy, successful family, even if it meant our own happiness was left on the cutting room floor. The ban on Ethan's 10th birthday party wasn't a new betrayal. It was just the final, clearest entry in a ledger that had been tracking our deficits for a lifetime. The phone call about Ethan's party was like a flash of lightning, illuminating a landscape I had been living in for years. But the storm had been gathering for a long, long time. The humiliation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was a series of small, subtle moments that, when added together, amounted to a soul-crushing weight. It was a constant, low-level hum of disapproval, a gentle but firm pressure to shrink, to be less, to want less. Every year, it was the same. The holidays were the worst. They were a masterclass in managing perceptions and feelings. Everyone's feelings except for mine and Ethan's. At Christmas, the rule about modest gifts was an annual tradition. After the Lego Castle incident, I learned my lesson. I would buy Ethan 1 or 2 nice presents that he would open at our home, just the 2 of us on Christmas morning. Then, I would bring a separate, smaller, less exciting gift for him to open at my mother's house. It felt deceptive and wrong, like I was hiding my love for my son. One year, I bought him a beautiful illustrated set of the Chronicles of Narnia, a series he was desperate to read. At home, his eyes lit up, and he immediately curled up on the couch to start the first book. The gift I brought to my mom's was a new pair of winter gloves. When it was time to open presents, my nephew, Noah, unwrapped a brand new drone. It was the top-of-the-line model. He immediately wanted to fly it in the house, and Patrick just laughed and said, "Go for it, sport." My mother beamed. Ethan opened his box and pulled out the gloves. He looked at them and then looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Oh, how practical," my mother said with bright, false cheer. "That's so sensible, Allison," I saw the look my brother's wife, Jessica, gave me. It was a mix of pity and smug satisfaction. She knew the game. We all did. Ethan said thank you, his voice small, and put the gloves back in the box. He didn't complain, but I could feel his disappointment like a physical presence in the room. He spent the rest of the afternoon watching Noah crash his expensive new toy into the furniture, and I spent the rest of the afternoon feeling like I had failed him. Easter was just as bad. My mom would host an elaborate Easter egg hunt in her backyard. She would spend days filling plastic eggs with candy and money, but there was always an unspoken rule. The hunt wasn't about fun. It was about ensuring Patrick's kids felt like winners. When Ethan was 7, he was faster than his cousins. He darted around the yard, his little basket filling up with brightly colored eggs. He even found the coveted golden egg, which always had a $20 bill inside. He was so proud. He ran over to me, his face glowing, holding the golden egg up for me to see. My niece Lily saw it and immediately burst into tears. She hadn't found a single egg yet. My mother rushed over, her face a mask of concern. She knelt down in front of Lily, ignoring Ethan completely. "Oh, sweetie, don't cry," she cooed. Then she looked up at Ethan. "Ethan, you have so many eggs. It's important to share. Why don't you give Lily half of your candy? And you should let her have the golden egg. You're older, you understand." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that wasn't sharing. That was just taking. I wanted to tell her that the point of a game is that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But the entire family was watching. Patrick was already walking over, a thunderous look on his face. So I did what I always did. I shrank. "Go on, Ethan," I said softly. "Give the egg to Lily." He looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion and betrayal. His lower lip trembled, but he was a good boy. He did what he was told. He walked over to his crying cousin and placed the golden egg in her basket. My mother praised him for being such a good, sweet boy, but the light had gone out of his eyes. He didn't look for any more eggs after that. He just sat on the porch steps until it was time to go home. His cousins never, ever had to share their candy with him. The humiliation wasn't just about Ethan. It was about me, too. My life was a constant source of concern, something to be managed. Last fall, I got a promotion at work. It wasn't a huge one, but it was significant for me. I was officially a senior bookkeeper. It came with a small raise and, more importantly, a little bit of respect. I had worked so hard for it, staying up late studying, taking on extra projects, proving myself. I called my mom, my voice buzzing with excitement. "Mom, I have great news. I got the promotion." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I expected a congratulations, or an "I'm so proud of you." Instead, she sighed. A deep, weary sigh. "Oh," she said. "Well, that's nice." "Nice?" I repeated, the excitement draining out of me. "It's great. It means we'll have a little extra money. We might even be able to take a small vacation next summer. Allison, please don't flaunt it around your brother," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's been so stressed lately. A big deal just fell through and he's worried about his numbers for the quarter. Just be sensitive." I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone to my ear, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I hadn't even thought about my brother. My good news had nothing to do with him, but in her mind everything was connected. My small success was a potential source of pain for him, and it was my job to hide it, to downplay it, to make sure it didn't upset the delicate balance of the family. So, when she called and banned Ethan's birthday party, it wasn't just another slight. It wasn't a random, thoughtless comment. It was the culmination of a lifetime of quiet humiliations. It was the moment she stated the family policy in the clearest possible terms. Your child does not deserve joy unless it benefits someone else. Your life must be lived in the shadows so that others can stand in the sun. It was the final, undeniable proof that in my own family, we were not people to be loved. We were problems to be solved. I hung up the phone with my mother, and the silence in the kitchen felt deafening. The gentle scratching of Ethan's pencil against paper had stopped. The house was still. All I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. I didn't move. I just stood there, the phone still clutched in my hand, my knuckles white. My gaze drifted to the refrigerator door, to a piece of paper held up by a cheerful-looking magnet shaped like a sunflower. It was Ethan's birthday list. He had made it last week, spending almost an hour on it. His printing was still a little clumsy, the letters big and round. At the top, he had drawn a lopsided cake with 10 candles. Next to it, he had written, pizza, pepperoni, soccer ball, a real one, balloons, friends. That was it. That was the whole list. He hadn't asked for an expensive gadget or designer clothes. He hadn't asked for a trip or a fancy party venue. He just wanted to eat pizza and kick a soccer ball around the small, patchy lawn in our backyard with a few of his friends. He had circled the word friends twice. He was a shy kid, and making friends hadn't always been easy for him. The fact that he felt confident enough to want to party, to invite other kids into his space, was a huge step. It was a victory. And my mother had just crushed it with a few calmly spoken sentences. He didn't want luxury. He wanted laughter. He wanted a day where he was the center of attention, not because he was being corrected or told to share, but because he was being celebrated. When I had spoken to my mom, I'd said, okay. The word had come out automatically. A reflex developed over 34 years of trying to keep the peace. It was the word I always used. Okay, I won't mention my promotion. Okay, I'll make Ethan give away his prize. Okay, I'll buy a smaller gift. Okay, I'll shrink. I'll disappear. I'll do whatever it takes to avoid a conflict, to avoid that look of disappointment in my mother's eyes. I had spent my entire life trying to make her proud, trying to earn a spot on the asset side of her ledger. I thought that if I was quiet enough, agreeable enough, and asked for little enough, she would finally see me. She would finally love me without conditions. But that night, as I stared at my son's hopeful, simple list, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud crack, but a quiet, tectonic shift deep within me. I realized I had been chasing something I could never catch. Her approval wasn't a prize to be won. It was a tool she used to control me. And in my desperate attempt to please her, I was teaching my son the most dangerous lesson of all, that love means asking for permission to be happy, that his feelings were less important than the feelings of his cousins, his uncle, his grandmother, that his worth was conditional. The isolation I felt in that moment was profound. It wasn't just that my mother and brother were against me. It felt like I was completely alone in the world. I had friends, of course, a few good ones from work, but this was family. This was the bedrock of my life, the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. And they were the storm. I went through the motions of the rest of the evening. I helped Ethan finish his math. I made spaghetti for dinner. We watched a nature show about penguins. But my mind was a million miles away. I was replaying every conversation, every holiday, every quiet humiliation. I saw the pattern so clearly now. It was a cage, built bar by bar, and I had willingly stayed inside it, thinking it was a home. Later, I tucked Ethan into bed. He was quiet, his earlier tears replaced by a sad resignation that broke my heart. "Mom?" he whispered into the darkness. "Yeah, honey? Can we still have cake? Just us?" I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Of course we can," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We will have the best cake in the world." He seemed satisfied with that, and soon drifted off to sleep. I stood in the doorway of his room for a long time, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He was so good, so kind. He deserved so much more than this constant battle for a scrap of validation. He deserved to have his joy protected, not negotiated. I went back to the living room and sat on the couch in the dark. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. My mother wasn't going to change. Patrick wasn't going to change. They were comfortable in the world they had built, a world that worked perfectly for them. I was the one who had to change. The breaking point wasn't the phone call itself. It was the reflection I saw in my son's eyes. It was the realization that I was passing my own chains down to him. I was teaching him to accept disrespect as a form of love. I was teaching him to apologize for his own existence. And I decided, sitting there in the quiet darkness of my rented duplex, that I was done. I was done trying to balance a ledger that was rigged from the start. I was done shrinking. I was done saying, okay. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. I was not going to tell my son that his 10th birthday didn't matter. I was not going to let anyone else decide when and how he was allowed to be happy. That night, I stopped being my mother's daughter and started truly being my son's mother. The isolation was terrifying, but for the first time, it also felt like freedom. The decision wasn't made in a moment of furious rebellion. It didn't come with a dramatic, tearful phone call or a slammed door. It settled quietly, peacefully, in the dead of night. It was a resolution that felt as natural and necessary as breathing. When my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I didn't hit snooze. I got up immediately, a sense of purpose humming through me that I hadn't felt in years. I walked into the kitchen, the linoleum cold under my bare feet, and switched on the small lamp above the counter. The house was still and dark. For a moment, I just stood there listening to the silence. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt calm. I opened the pantry and pulled out the box of chocolate cake mix, the tub of frosting, the eggs, and the oil. I got out a large mixing bowl and a whisk. I started to make Ethan's birthday cake. The simple physical act of measuring flour, cracking eggs, and whisking the batter felt grounding. It was a quiet act of defiance, a statement made not with words but with action. Each stir of the whisk was a choice. I'm choosing my son. I am choosing his joy. I am choosing us. A little while later, I heard the soft patter of feet. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He saw the bowl, the cake mix, the mess of chocolate on the counter. His face was a mixture of confusion and hope. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice a sleepy whisper. "I'm making your birthday cake," I said simply, not breaking the rhythm of my whisking. He took a few steps closer, his eyes wide. "I thought Grandma said we couldn't," he whispered, as if saying it too loud might make the moment disappear. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him fully. I knelt down so I was at his eye level. I wanted him to see my face, to see that I was serious, that this wasn't a trick. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "We're doing it anyway," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You turned 10 once. We are celebrating." That was it. No big announcement, no dramatic speech about standing up for ourselves. Just a simple statement of fact. His face broke into a smile so bright it felt like the sun had just risen in our tiny kitchen. He threw his arms around my neck and hugged me tight. "Can I help?" he asked, his voice muffled in my shoulder. "You bet," I said. "You're the official sprinkle supervisor." The rest of the morning was a joyful blur. We baked the cake together, getting chocolate batter on our pajamas. While it cooled, we planned the party. It wasn't a grand affair. I sent a group text to the mothers of 6 of his closest friends from school, inviting them for a simple backyard party on Saturday. Pizza, cake, and soccer. No gifts necessary, just come and celebrate Ethan turning 10. Within an hour, all 6 had replied with an enthusiastic yes. We spent the day getting ready. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was resourceful. I found a secondhand soccer net on a local marketplace website for $20. We went to the dollar store and bought a pack of bright blue balloons and a plastic tablecloth with soccer balls on it. Ethan picked out the candles for his cake, a big number 1 and a 0. It was the opposite of everything my mother and brother valued. There was nothing impressive or expensive. Our decorations were cheap, the cake was from a box, and the main event was just kids running around in the yard. But it was ours. It was born not out of obligation or a desire to impress, but out of pure, simple love. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text my brother. I didn't feel the need to explain or justify my decision. For the first time, their opinion didn't matter. The anxiety I usually felt, the constant worry about what they would think or say, was just gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. My only focus was on the little boy currently trying to blow up a balloon until his cheeks puffed out like a chipmunk's. His laughter echoed in our small living room, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. That was the real decision. It wasn't just about throwing a party. It was a decision to stop living my life in reaction to my family. It was a decision to build my own world, with its own rules. And in this new world, the first and only rule was that my child's happiness was not up for debate. It was non-negotiable. On the morning of the party, Ethan woke me up by jumping on my bed, his face alight with an excitement I hadn't seen in him for a long time. "It's party day," he yelled. We finished decorating the backyard, tying the cheap balloons to the fence posts and setting up the soccer net. The sun was shining. The day felt perfect. It was small, it was simple, and it was entirely ours. We were no longer apologizing for our joy. We were living it. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that no matter what happened next, I had made the right choice. The party was perfect. It was a perfect, chaotic, beautiful mess. 6 10-year-old boys were in the backyard, their voices a happy chorus of shouts and laughter. They were kicking the soccer ball with a wild, joyful abandon that made my heart feel full. The second-hand net I'd bought was already sagging on one side, but nobody cared. The cheap plastic tablecloth was already stained with pizza grease and spilled soda. The balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze. It was everything I had wanted for Ethan. It was simple, it was real, and it was his. He was a different boy in the middle of that happy chaos. He wasn't the quiet, hesitant child who worried about taking up too much space. He was loud. He was confident. He scored a goal and his friends lifted him onto their shoulders, cheering his name. I watched from the back porch, a plate of half-eaten pizza in my hand, and I felt a sense of peace so profound it almost brought me to tears. This was right. This was what a childhood should sound like. I was heading back inside to grab the cake when I heard a familiar sound that made the peaceful bubble pop. It was the click of the latch on our side gate. I froze. None of the kids' parents were due for another hour. A cold dread, A feeling I recognized deep in my bones washed over me. I turned and my breath caught in my throat. My mother was walking across the lawn. Patrick was right behind her, and his wife Jessica trailed behind him like a shadow. They were not smiling. My mother's face was set in a tight, grim line. Patrick looked angry, his arms crossed over his chest. Jessica was glaring at the simple, homemade decorations as if they had personally offended her. They moved through the party like a dark cloud, the laughter of the children seeming to quiet slightly as they passed. They were so out of place in their pressed khakis and expensive sweaters, intruders in our little world of joy. For a heartbeat, the old Allison surfaced, the one who would have rushed over, apologizing, trying to smooth things over, to manage their feelings. The urge to say, "It's not what it looks like," was a powerful ingrained reflex. But then I looked at Ethan. He had stopped playing and was staring at them, the bright light in his eyes dimming. The confident, happy boy was gone, replaced by the child who knew he was about to get in trouble for being happy, and that was all it took. The old Allison vanished. The mother, the protector, stood her ground. My mom didn't stop until she was standing directly in front of me on the porch steps. She didn't even say hello. Her voice was sharp, low enough so the other kids wouldn't hear, but laced with a fury that was unmistakable. "We talked about this, Allison," she hissed. "You went behind my back. You're being selfish." "I'm celebrating my son's birthday," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't let it shake. I just stated a fact. Patrick stepped up beside her, his face red with indignation. He gestured vaguely at the laughing children. "You're making my kids feel unimportant again," he said, his voice a petulant whine. Jessica had to spend all morning explaining to Lily why Ethan gets a party and she doesn't. "Do you have any idea how hard that is?" The absurdity of his statement was breathtaking. Lily had a birthday party every year that was more elaborate than most weddings. She had pony rides, bouncy castles, and catered food. The idea that my son's humble backyard gathering could somehow erase all of that was insane. It had nothing to do with Lily's feelings. It had to do with his. He couldn't stand for me to have something that wasn't filtered through him, that wasn't approved by the family committee. He couldn't stand for me to be happy on my own terms. I looked past them, past their angry, twisted faces. I looked at the party. One of the boys had just tripped over the soccer ball and fallen, and the rest of them had piled on top of him in a fit of giggles. Ethan was in the middle of the pile, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. They were messy, they were loud, they were gloriously, uncomplicatedly happy. They were everything my family was not. My gaze returned to my brother. I looked him directly in the eye. The frantic beating in my chest had slowed. I was completely calm. The truth was so simple, so obvious. I wasn't the one with the problem. They were. "If your kids need someone else's birthday to feel important," I said, and my voice was quiet, clear, and without a trace of anger. "That's not my problem to fix." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the distant laughter of the children. My mother's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked as if I had slapped her. Patrick just stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. He was so used to me backing down, so used to me apologizing for my own existence, that he didn't know how to react. He had no script for this version of me. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't cried. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply drawn a line, not in the sand but in solid rock. On one side was their world of emotional blackmail, jealousy, and control. On the other side was my world, my son, and our right to be happy. And for the first time in my life, I hadn't just chosen my side. I had defended it. The stunned silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My words hung in the air between us, stark and undeniable. I had taken their entire worldview, the one where all family members orbited around Patrick's ego and my mother's anxieties, and I had rejected it, completely. My mother was the first to recover. Her shock curdled into a cold, trembling rage. The mask of calm disappointment she usually wore slipped, and for a moment, I saw the raw, desperate need for control that lay beneath it. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fury. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "After everything we have done for you, we help you, we worry about you, and this is the thanks we get? You throw our love back in our faces and choose strangers over your own family." The guilt was a familiar hook. It snagged at me, a deep instinctual pull to apologize, to take it back, to restore the peace at any cost. I could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the lifetime of training to be the good, quiet daughter who smoothed everything over. "Just say you're sorry," a voice in my head pleaded. "Just make it stop." But then I looked at Ethan. He was watching us from the lawn, his friends forgotten for a moment. His face was filled with a nervous hope. He was watching to see what I would do. He was watching to see if I would fight for him, or if I would fold, like all the times before. He was my anchor. He kept me steady. Patrick, emboldened by my mother's outburst, took another step forward. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. He was used to being the center of attention, the one who was always right. My quiet defiance was an insult he couldn't tolerate. "You'll regret this, Allison," he snarled, dropping his voice to a low threat. "You think this is clever, standing up to us in front of your little friends? You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing this family, and you will regret it." The threat was vague, but I knew what it meant. It meant social isolation. It meant turning the rest of the family against me. It meant leveraging every bit of power he had to make my life difficult. It was the final, desperate move of a bully who had lost control, but the fear I should have felt simply wasn't there. All I felt was a profound sense of pity. They were trapped in a game I was no longer playing. Their threats, their guilt, their anger, it all felt like noise from a distant room. It couldn't touch me here. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list the years of slights and humiliations that had brought us to this point. There was no need. The argument was already over. I had already won, not by beating them, but by simply walking off the field. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my brother's furious one. "I'm not walking away from family," I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. "I'm walking toward peace." And then I did the most powerful thing I have ever done in my life. I turned my back on them. I walked down the 2 porch steps and back into the party. The action was so simple, so final. It was a physical manifestation of the boundary I had just set. I left them standing there, speechless, in the middle of my backyard. I walked over to the picnic table where the lopsided chocolate cake was waiting. "Okay, buddy." I called out to Ethan, my voice bright and clear. "Time for cake." A huge grin spread across Ethan's face. He and his friends abandoned their game and swarmed the table, their earlier caution forgotten. I picked up the box of matches and began lighting the 10 little candles. One by one, the tiny flames flickered to life. I could feel my mother's eyes on my back. I could feel her glare, a physical pressure. I knew she was still standing there on the porch, watching, waiting for me to turn around, to crumble, to apologize. I didn't. I focused on the candles. I focused on the circle of happy, expectant faces around the table. I focused on my son, his eyes dancing in the candlelight. His friends started singing Happy Birthday. Their voices were loud, off-key, and utterly beautiful. I sang along with them, my voice joining the messy, joyful chorus. For those 30 seconds, nothing else in the world existed but my son, his cake, and his song. "Make a wish, honey," I said when the song was over. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew. All 10 candles went out in one puff. The kids cheered. Ethan beamed, a look of pure, unadulterated happiness on his face. And in that moment, as he smiled at me, I felt it. A lightness in my chest. A feeling of chains. So old I had forgotten they were there, simply falling away. I was free. I had chosen my son's joy over their drama. I had chosen peace over their approval. I had let my mother glare from the porch, and I had lit the candles anyway. The quiet revenge wasn't in my words. It was in that simple, defiant act of celebration. They left before the cake was even cut. I didn't watch them go. I heard the side gate click shut, a quiet, final sound that was drowned out by the kids clamoring for the biggest slice. I handed Ethan the knife, and he made the first cut into his own birthday cake. It felt like a ceremony, a declaration of independence. The rest of the party passed in a happy, sugar-fueled haze. The parents arrived to pick up their children, and they all thanked me for having them. "Ethan is such a great kid," one of the moms said as she left. "He looked so happy today." The words were a balm to my soul. She saw him. She saw his happiness. It was so simple, yet it was everything my own family had refused to acknowledge. After the last guest had gone, Ethan and I cleaned up together. We threw away the paper plates and pizza boxes, deflated the balloons, and folded the stained tablecloth. We worked in a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between two people who are perfectly in sync. He was tired but humming with a happy energy. "That was the best birthday ever," he said, as he helped me load the dishwasher. "Ever. I'm glad, honey," I said, ruffling his hair. "You deserve it." We settled onto the couch to watch a movie, and for a few hours the world was perfect. But I knew it wouldn't last. Sometime around 9 o'clock, my phone, which I had left on the KII, waited until Ethan was asleep before I looked at it. There were 3 new text messages. The first was from my mother. "Mom, I have never been so disappointed and humiliated in my entire life. You have divided this family with your selfishness. Your father is beside himself. I don't even know what to say to you. The second was from Patrick. Patrick, your behavior today was childish and disrespectful. You owe me and Jessica an apology. But more importantly, you owe Mom an apology. You made a scene and you hurt her deeply. I hope you're proud of yourself. The third message, the one that was designed to be the killing blow, was from Jessica. Jessica, Patrick told me you might be having some trouble making rent next month. After today's display, we're reconsidering helping you out. Actions have consequences, Allison. A year ago, even a week ago, those messages would have destroyed me. I would have been flooded with panic, guilt, and terror. The threat about the rent was their trump card, the ultimate tool of control. They had helped me out a few times over the years when things were tight, and it was always held over my head. Another entry in the family ledger that I could never zero out. It was their chain, and they had just yanked it hard. Chain counter began to buzz, and then it buzzed again. And again, the attack was beginning. But something beautiful and strange happened as I read the words on the screen. I didn't flinch. I felt a flicker of the old fear, a ghost of the panic, but it was weak and distant. It had no power over me. I saw the messages for exactly what they were, not a reflection of my bad behavior, but a confirmation of theirs. They were desperate, clumsy attempts to pull me back into the cage. Guilt, anger, financial blackmail. It was all they had. Just then, there was a soft knock on the front door. I opened it to find my coworker and friend, Anna. She was holding a bottle of wine. She was a single mom, too, and we had a standing agreement to be each other's emergency support system. I saw your pictures from the party on social media, she said, stepping inside. It looked like so much fun. I figured you might need this after a day of 10-year-old boy energy. You have no idea, I laughed, taking the wine. We sat at my small kitchen table, and I told her everything. I told her about the phone call, the decision to have the party anyway, and the dramatic, uninvited arrival of my family. I told her about the confrontation, the things they had said, and the things I had said back. As I recounted the story, I didn't feel shame or fear. I felt a sense of clarity. When I was finished, Anna was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass. She looked at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. You know, she said slowly, I've known you for 3 years, and I have never seen you like this. Like what? A mess? I asked, trying to make a joke. No, she said, shaking her head. Not at all. You look lighter. Her words hit me with the force of a revelation. Lighter. That was exactly it. A weight I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten it was even there. The weight of their expectations, their judgment, their constant, silent disapproval was gone. I felt lighter because I was finally free. I showed her the text message from Jessica about the rent. Anna read it and her eyes narrowed. Wow, she breathed. That's not family love. That's emotional blackmail. I know, I said. And I really truly did. We spent the next hour on my laptop, not drinking wine, but looking at apartment listings. The idea, which had been a vague, impossible dream, suddenly became a concrete plan. The rent threat wasn't a chain holding me in place anymore. It was a key unlocking the door. They thought it was their ultimate weapon, but they had just given me the ultimate gift, a reason to leave for good. By Monday, it was done. I found a tiny, clean one-bedroom apartment 2 towns over. It was smaller than our duplex and in a less fancy neighborhood, but it was affordable on my salary alone. It would be tight, but we would manage. We wouldn't need their help. We wouldn't need anything from them. That night, Ethan and I started packing. We put our books in boxes, wrapped our dishes in newspaper, and took our pictures off the walls. Each box I taped shut felt like sealing away a piece of the past. I wasn't just packing up our belongings. I was packing up the old rules, the old shame, the old life where I was a secondary character in my own story. I was walking toward peace, and it started with a roll of packing tape and a stack of cardboard boxes. The move saved us. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's the honest truth. The tiny apartment, with its slightly crooked floors and a kitchen that could barely fit 2 people, became our sanctuary. It was the first place that felt entirely ours, a space where we weren't living under the shadow of anyone else's judgment. The change in Ethan was almost immediate. The anxious little line that had always seemed to be etched between his eyebrows disappeared. He started sleeping through the night without the nightmares he'd occasionally have. The ones where he would wake up crying because he was afraid he was in trouble for being too loud or in trouble for having fun. In our new home, there was no one to get in trouble with. He could be as loud as he wanted. His laughter filled the small space, bouncing off the walls. It was a sound I realized I hadn't heard nearly enough. He made friends at his new school easily. Kids who didn't know him as the quiet cousin of the more important children. But just as Ethan, the the boy who was really good at soccer and told funny jokes. He blossomed. He was becoming the person he was always meant to be, away from the toxic soil of my family's influence. I changed too. Without the constant, low-level stress of anticipating my mother's next criticism or my brother's next demand, I felt my own shoulders relax. I focused on my work, took on a few new clients, and found that the little bit of extra money I made was more than enough to cover our modest expenses. We weren't rich, but we were independent. That feeling of self-reliance was worth more than any amount of money my brother could have ever offered me. I didn't hear from my family for months. After a final, unanswered barrage of angry texts, they went silent. I think they expected me to come crawling back, to apologize, to beg for the financial help they had withdrawn. When I didn't, they didn't know what to do. My independence had stripped them of their power. A year passed like that, in a quiet, peaceful rhythm. Before I knew it, Ethan's 11th birthday was approaching. This time there was no anxiety, no careful negotiation. We planned his party together openly and joyfully. We invited his entire class to a local park. We had pizza, a store-bought cake that he picked out himself, and dozens of balloons. It was a loud, happy public celebration. I took pictures, lots of them, and I posted them online without a second thought. There was Ethan, surrounded by a huge group of smiling friends, his face smeared with blue frosting. He looked radiant. A few days later, I was frosting cupcakes for his school bake sale when there was a hard, insistent knock on the door. My heart didn't leap with fear. I just felt a weary sense of resignation. I opened the door and there was Patrick. He looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive polo shirt was wrinkled. He looked stressed and angry, a stark contrast to the man in the perfect family photos he posted online. He didn't wait for an invitation to come in. He pushed past me into my tiny living room and looked around with a sneer. "This is it?" he said. "This is what you left us for? A shoebox?" "It's home, Patrick," I said calmly, closing the door. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" He spun around, his voice rising. "I want you to see what you've done." Mom saw the pictures from his party. She cried for hours. "For hours, Allison? You've ruined her image in the community. People ask about you and she has to lie, to make up stories because the truth is too embarrassing." I just stared at him. After a whole year, that was his concern. Not how I was doing. Not how his nephew was. His concern was his mother's image. The story she told her friends. The perfect family facade that had been cracked. He wasn't there because he missed me. He was there because my happiness was an inconvenience, a stain on their reputation. The old me would have engaged. I would have defended myself, argued with him, maybe even cried. But the woman standing in that living room wasn't the old me. I felt a wave of pity for him, for how small and trapped his world was. He was still playing the game and he couldn't see that the board had been put away. I let him finish his tirade. I let him vent all his frustration and misplaced anger. When he finally ran out of steam, his chest heaving, I looked at him, my expression calm. "Her image?" I asked, my voice quiet. "That's what this is about? Her image?" "Of course," he sputtered. "Family is about loyalty, about protecting each other." I shook my head slowly, a sad smile on my face. "No, Patrick, that's not what this is about." I took a deep breath, the smell of sugar and vanilla from the cupcakes filling the air. And then I said the words that had been forming in my heart for the past year. The simple, final truth of it all. "Maybe she should stop worrying about her image," I said, "and start worrying about her reflection." He stared at me, his mouth agape. He had no response. The words hit him, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not understanding, but confusion, as if I had just spoken to him in a foreign language. He had no defense against that kind of truth. His weapons, guilt, anger, money, were useless against it. He left without another word, his face red and tight with a mixture of anger and shame. I watched him go, and then I closed the door, locking it behind him. I went back to the kitchen, picked up the piping bag, and went back to frosting the cupcakes for my son's bake sale. The war was over, and I hadn't even realized I had won until that very moment. The peace in my small apartment was absolute. I used to think forgiveness meant going back, pretending things were okay, and allowing the people who hurt you to do it again. Now I know forgiveness is something you do for yourself. It means moving on without bitterness. It means accepting that you can't change people, but you can change whether or not you let them hurt you. It means finding peace even if you have to find it on your own. My mom still hasn't apologized. She probably never will. She sends occasional texts, filled with vague comments about family unity and how much she misses how things used to be. She means she misses when I was controllable. I reply when I feel like it, with polite, distant sentences. The power is mine now. The conversation is on my terms. Ethan's 12 now. He's tall and lanky, on the verge of becoming a teenager. He's kind and funny and confident. When he laughs, it's a full-bodied, uninhibited sound. It sounds like freedom. It's the sound that tells me I did the right thing. So if you've ever been told to dim your joy so others don't feel small, don't. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're not wrong for choosing your child's happiness. And if you've ever had to walk away from the people who raised you to raise your own heart instead, hit subscribe, share your story in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because peace isn't the absence of family. It's the presence of love that doesn't require permission.